I have got a 5-step process to get the New York Jets back on the fast track to possibly winning a Super Bowl next year, but definitely in contention to win the AFC East and some playoff games where they should have been this season. With Aaron Rodgers back at the helm, there's a lot to do, so let's talk about it. The very first thing, number one on the list, before they can even address the offensive line, it's looking at that cap number. The New York Jets currently have $6.6 million in cap space for 2024. That's not enough to do everything that they need to do. Also, there's some things you have to do with Breece Hall. He's coming off a really nice season. He's going to be an expensive guy. Last year of his contract last year. We'll talk about that too. But how do they create some space for them right now? CJ Mosley's cap hit in 2024 is $21.4 million. There are some things right here we can do immediately with this, which is restructuring him. Like I said, he's entering the last year of his 5-year contract. There are 2 void years on the end of that, but he will be an unrestricted free agent in 2025, and he saves $10.5 million against the cap. So that gives them already a lot more flexibility. It bumps them up to about $16-17 million in cap space. And then there's one other player that has a pretty good amount of money that can be saved. It's John Franklin Myers. And Franklin Myers is a guy that plays inside and outside for the Jets. He's done really well, really being a facilitated guy that in that rotation, kind of going to be a starter next year as well. So he's really allowed the Jets to take it a little bit slower with Will Anderson. With Will McDonald and with Jermaine Johnson. But he's a guy that they would like to have back next season. And I think it's really important to have some of those guys that play on the inside and outside. So they restructure him as well. And like I said, his next, in 2025, is the last year of his contract. But if they restructure him in 2024, he saves $9.2 million against the cap, which adds that to your end total there. And then just cut CJ Uzomah, who saves them $8 million against the cap. So those 3 cap-saving moves get them to around the $34 million mark in cap space, which is not ideal. You'd like to have more to play around with, but there are some other moves that they can make. But to get to a point where they can be a player in free agency and maybe bring in some guys to have those contracts there, and then you can mess around with at the end of the end years towards them. These are 3 things that I think they have to do, and they will do, to create some cap space. Now, the second thing I think the Jets need to do is tag and trade Breece Hall. Coming off 10 sacks last season, he's going to be a player that's more expensive. Now, they did create some cap space like I did just now. They're going to be able to do that, but they need more than just Breece Hall on that defensive line. They still have Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson with John Franklin Myers. I think that you can facilitate some depth players to get around that as well. You still have Quinn Williams. So Breece Hall is fantastic to have when he's on his contract. He's not there anymore. He's going to be expensive. You're looking for about 2nd round value back for that trade, and I think you can get a 2nd round pick for him. So tagging and trading Breece Hall gives you, the Jets, now another day 2 pick when they only had a 1st, a 3rd, 2 4ths, and a 6th going into this draft. Now you have a 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd. That's good ammunition to add to your offense, and we're going to get there here in a second. But before they even get to the draft, now they've got cap space. They've created a helpful situation for their draft by trading Breece Hall. They got to get some depth in free agency. Offensive line has to be nailed with some starters, possibly, but definitely some depth. The guy that I'm looking at right now to bring in is Jonah Williams, who played right tackle for the Bengals last season, but his best tape is at left tackle. That's what I would do. I would bring him in after a couple of rougher years and play him at left tackle initially. You're going to have some options there as well that you don't always have, but he is a guy who has been a starting tackle in the league, and he hasn't really gotten hurt. Knock on wood. He's 26 years old. Right now, his valued contract is about $15 million per, but I think you can get him a little bit cheaper than that after this season specifically at right tackle. Bring him in, pay him about $13, $14 per season, but have that pushed back. So that's going to help their offensive line right now. They have tackle need. There is not a tackle right now on the roster outside of Warren McClendon, and not Warren McClendon, Carter Warren. I always do that with the guys that were drafted last season. Carter Warren is a right tackle, but he's probably going to be a depth piece. There's not enough to know about Max Mitchell. Is he going to play? But we do know that Lincoln Tomlinson, Joe Tippmann, and AVT will be there next season. They got to attack there, but they need some depth behind those guys too. So there's a couple of players, Ezra Cleveland, who can play guard tackle, that was traded from the Vikings to the Jags. He didn't play very much there. Would be more of a depth signing as well. Younger player you might be able to develop as well. But the guy that I'm really interested in is Nick Allegretti, who has center guard flexibility, played really good football for the Chiefs, and in 2020, he was their full-time left guard. He has starting experience. He would be cheap. He'd be a good depth piece, but also a guy that you can spot start when you need to because he has that experience. He's someone that I would look to bring in if the Chiefs don't bring him back 100%. And then the fourth thing that I'm looking at after you address the offensive line, they need to they need to bring in a backup quarterback. You can't do it with Zach Wilson anymore. He's going to be on the team anyway because his contract isn't up, but cutting him doesn't save money, it only hurts the Jets. So you need somebody that you can rely on in worst case scenario. We don't want that to happen to Aaron Rodgers, but Jacoby Brissett has now done it for 2 years with the Cleveland Browns 2 years ago, and then the Washington Commanders this past season. He is the ideal kind of backup quarterback to have behind Aaron Rodgers, just in case. He's going to be 41 years old this season. You never know. So I think they need to make a run at him. And then a couple of wide receivers that can come in, play, but also be depth players and give them some spark. They need someone that could take some attention away from Garrett Wilson. Donovan Peoples-Jones, who was traded from the Cleveland Browns to the Detroit Lions this season. He hasn't played very much for the Lions. I don't expect them to bring him back, and he is a free agent in the 2024 offseason. He's going to bring some punt return ability as well that you have, so you have a backup punt returner. I know that they have some guys in Gibson and, Brownlee that could possibly bring that as well, but I think that Donovan Peoples-Jones has been an established punt returner, but also he can play on the outside. He is a deep threat, something that they do kind of need, a big body that can go down the field and make some of those contested catches that Donovan Peoples-Jones is known for making. And then you need some more gadgetry, speed guy who can play on the outside, play on the inside, runs good routes. That's Kendrick Bourne. I think you can get him at a cheap $4 to $5 million contract. He'd be a fun player to add with Aaron Rodgers just because they love to do those little screens and things like that. With Allen Lazard basically being benched at sometime this season, we know that Randall Cobb's not going to come back. I think Kendrick Bourne would be a good signing for the Jets. And that brings us to the draft. My fifth thing that the Jets have to do after creating that cap space, tagging and trading Breece Hall, getting that offensive line depth, possibly getting those two wide receivers and Jacoby Brissett. With the 10th pick, it's tackle. I'm going after right tackle Talise Fuaga out of Oklahoma State. He is a physical guy. He is so strong. His hands are vice grips. When he gets his hands on you, it's over. He has some issues with his footwork and his drop. He can overset a little too much because he's always trying to get to his spot before some of your speed rushers, but he can be beat around the edge. I think Aaron Rodgers is fantastic at mitigating some of his weaknesses. Personally, I think at 10, he's a fantastic player. I have him as a top 15 player in the draft. And at 10, you need to be able to hit a home run at tackle and get someone to protect the right side, but also be a force in the run game for Breece Hall. And Talise Fuaga is that guy. They still need wide receiver help. They still need more players there. And they need someone that can do a little bit of everything. They can be that guy that's find those soft spots and zones that Aaron Rodgers is going to find. Ladd McConkey out of wide receiver out of Georgia in the second round with that pick you got from trading Breece Hall would be a fantastic addition. Like I said, he finds those soft spots in the zone and would be a guy I've likened to Jacoby Myers, who can play on the outside. He can make some nice catches. He has some speed, some yards after catch, but for the most part, he is a fantastic space player. He finds it and he can create it for himself. He would be great in that offense with Aaron Rodgers. And then some defensive tackle depth and help. Orohoro. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. Defense tackle out of Clemson in the third round would be a guy to have as a rotational pass rushing type of defensive tackle. He's athletic. He's not super long, but he's lean. He's like 6'3", 290 pounds. He's more of a 5'3" tech, but he has played 0 all the way to 5 tech at Clemson. He has a lot of experience doing that. He got much better in the run game this past season, anchoring and knowing how to distribute his own weight, so he's not getting thrown down to the ground. He's flashed a lot as a pass rusher, which would help more next to Quinn Williams on those passing downs. So I think that he would be a fun player to add into that defensive tackle and defensive line rotation. So that's my 5-step plan, New York Jets fans. I hope that you guys see what I'm trying to do here, and I think that there's a lot that would help them right away. But I'm all about learning. So you guys are the experts here. I want to hear your opinions, New York Jets fans. What would you do in addition to or instead of what I've got laid out here? I do think this would be a great starting point in getting them right back into it, but I want to hear you guys' opinions in the comment section. Let me know what you would do and what you want to see them do this offseason to get the Jets back to where they probably should have been this season, vying for that AFC East championship. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, allowed me to earn a like from you for this plan for the Jets. You guys have yourselves a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.